A black female CEO boarded a morning flight, a perfectly valid first-class ticket in hand. Yet, within seconds, she was being questioned by dozens of eyes, not because she was wrong, but because someone believed she didn't belong there. At that moment, what will you do? Stand up angrily, keep quiet and swallow it, or smile and let the hurt gnaw at your heart? If it were you, what would you choose when being looked down upon, right in front of everyone? How many times in our lives have we been judged simply because of our looks, the color of our skin, or where we come from? How many times have we asked ourselves, if only they would listen to me before looking at me? And what happens when one strong yet compassionate person decides to stand up, not with a shout, but with a kindness and a dignity that makes the world fall silent? If you have ever suffered from judgment, you will want to hear this story. Join Helena Brooks on her emotional journey. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on more heartwarming stories like this one. The first thing Dr. Helena Brooks noticed that morning was the cold glow of the overhead LEDs stretching across Concourse B at Denver International Airport. It was the kind of early daylight that made the polished floors look like sheets of ice. People shuffled past in thick coats, clutching paper cups of coffee still steaming in the thin Colorado air. Helena stood quietly in line at Gate B14, holding her boarding pass between two fingers. A soft crease of fatigue sat at the corner of her eyes, but her posture remained straight, centered, composed. She had the calmness of someone who had lived long enough to understand which battles required a raised voice, and which ones could be navigated with silence. She inhaled slowly. The scent of roasted beans from a nearby cafe, the distant hum of luggage wheels, the muted announcements over the PA system. Denver felt familiar, almost comforting. She had flown through this airport more times than she could count, especially in the last 2 years. Being the CEO of Bright Halo Energy meant endless travel, endless negotiations, endless pressure, but today was supposed to be simple. A straightforward flight to Salt Lake City, a quiet morning, no cameras, no board members waiting, just Helena and her thoughts. The boarding process had just begun. First-class passengers may now board, called the gate attendant. Her voice was clipped, sharp, and carried the exhaustion of someone who had repeated that line far too many times in a week. Helena stepped forward, offering a polite nod to the people around her. She wasn't flashy. She never liked attention. Her charcoal gray coat, her simple leather tote, even her low, calm voice, all of it made her blend into the scene. A quiet figure in a busy airport. But sometimes, even quiet figures become the center of a storm. When Helena reached the front of the line, she extended her boarding pass with a gentle smile. "Good morning," she offered. The gate attendant barely glanced at her. "Economy is later, ma'am. Please step aside." The words hit Helena with a familiar weight. Not surprising. Not new. Just familiar. A tone she had grown up with. A tone she had thought she'd grown past by becoming who she was. Helena kept her voice steady. "I'm in first class, seat 1A. The attendant's expression tightened not with confusion, but with doubt. "I'm sure it's a mistake. Please step aside while I check." A few heads in the line turned. A woman holding a toddler shifted awkwardly. An older man in a navy windbreaker frowned, sensing something wrong. A young couple behind Helena exchanged glances, the kind that carried a mix of discomfort and disappointment. The attendant didn't scan the boarding pass, didn't check the system, didn't look again. She simply folded her arms, as if this was no longer about airline policy, as if she had already decided the truth. Helena felt the air around her tighten. Not just the cold of the terminal, but something heavier, something she knew intimately. It lived in the space between assumption and judgment, in the tightening lips of the attendant, in the sideways glances from strangers who weren't sure what to believe. She had lived this before, on playgrounds, on sidewalks, in classrooms, in boardrooms, in negotiations where people only realized who she was after seeing the name printed on her card. But she kept her voice soft. If you scan the pass, the system will confirm it. The attendant's face hardened. "Ma'am, you're holding up the line. Please wait. Security will assist." A hush rippled down the boarding area. Even the overhead announcements felt quieter. A young man, 3 people behind Helena, lifted his phone, the camera discreetly angled. Another passenger muttered, "Come on, just scan it." Helena didn't move, didn't argue. Her stillness was almost disarming, almost graceful. She let herself stand there, absorbing everything. The humiliation, the irritation, the old ache she thought she'd left behind years ago. Her heartbeat slowed, not with fear, but with clarity. She thought of her father's voice. "Some moments choose us, Lena, and some moments ask us who we want to be." She exhaled gently, letting the breath leave her chest like a quiet release of years she never quite sorted through. She wasn't just a CEO. She wasn't just another passenger. She wasn't even someone irritated by an inconvenience. She was a woman standing inside a story she knew too well, one written with assumptions she never agreed to. A second attendant came over. "What's going on?" The first one gestured sharply. "I believe she's trying to board first class with an invalid ticket." Invalid. The word stung not because it was loud, but because it wasn't even whispered with doubt. It was said like a conclusion, like a fact. Helena glanced at the people watching, not with anger, more with a quiet sadness, a kind of grief for how predictable this moment felt. She closed her eyes briefly. A silent pause, a breath before the shift. In that brief stillness, time seemed to slow. The boarding gate, the bustle, the noise, they all softened into the background. The story narrowed into one clear frame, Helena standing alone, dignified, holding a small piece of paper that apparently wasn't enough. And then, very slowly, she opened her eyes again. Something in her expression had changed. Not sharp, not hostile, just decided. The next 5 minutes would change everything. For her, for the airline, for the woman who had judged her in a single glance. But in this moment, this quiet, suspended moment, Helena simply stood there, with the calm strength of someone who knew what world she had walked through and knew exactly what lines she would no longer cross in silence. This was only the beginning. The security officer hadn't arrived yet, but the shift in the atmosphere told Helena everything she needed to know. Something had been set in motion. People whispered to each other in hushed tones, unsure where to place their sympathy or discomfort. At the front of the gate, the attendant hovered with an air of impatience, as if each passing second validated her belief that Helena did not belong there. Helena stepped a little to the side, not because she accepted the accusation, but because she needed space to breathe. The cool air from the high vents brushed against her skin, reminding her how early mornings in Denver always felt slightly raw. She let the sensation steady her. Moments like this had a strange way of peeling back layers she kept tightly wrapped. Joins of memory and years of carrying herself with restraint began to loosen. She had learned long ago that the world often met her with assumptions first, truth second. And in between those two came the discomfort she never wished on anyone. Yet she had also learned to carry herself with an authority that did not require volume. It came from years of education, long nights studying by a flickering lamp during her doctoral years, countless board meetings where she walked into rooms where no one looked like her, rooms where she was mistaken for an assistant, a visitor, sometimes even the catering staff. But she stayed, she grew, she excelled, and she became Dr. Helena Brooks, the quietly fierce leader of Bright Halo Energy, a company pioneering sustainable fuel innovations across the western United States. A woman whose decisions shaped entire industries. A woman whose signature rested on a multi-billion-dollar transition deal with Sky West Airlines, the very company she was trying to board a plane with this morning. None of that mattered here at Gate B14. Here she was, just another passenger in front of an attendant who had decided that she was out of place. Helena lifted her gaze and took in the scene more deliberately. A young woman in a knitted beanie rocked her stroller gently while watching the situation unfold with concerned eyes. A middle-aged man in a plaid shirt shifted uncomfortably, torn between wanting to intervene and not wanting to cause trouble. Behind him, a business traveler with a laptop bag opened his mouth as if to speak, but then closed it again. People saw what was happening. Not everyone liked it, but most had learned through life that stepping forward could come with consequences. Helena did not hold that against them. She pressed her thumb against the edge of her boarding pass. The paper felt crisp, clean. It was a small reminder that something tangible, something real, still belonged to her even when perception tried to take it away. Her phone buzzed gently in her coat pocket, a soft vibration that felt unnervingly loud in the charged silence. She didn't reach for it. She knew it was likely her assistant, reminding her about the upcoming meeting in Salt Lake City or confirming a detail related to the afternoon's presentation. Work moved on even when the world paused around her. The attendant called out the next passenger, ignoring Helena entirely as if she had disappeared from the line. A younger woman scanned her ticket and hurried through, eyes darting toward Helena with a flash of sympathy before she turned down the jet bridge. Helena closed her eyes for a brief moment. It wasn't a gesture of surrender. It was a recalibration. When she opened them again, she felt a renewed steadiness, as if her heartbeat had settled into a slower, more deliberate rhythm. The memory of her childhood drifted in gently. She saw herself at 9 years old, sitting on the steps of her family's small home in Houston. Her father, a gentle man with a deep voice and warm patience, sat beside her. She remembered asking him why some people spoke to her differently than they spoke to other kids. Her father had taken a long breath that day, the kind of breath adults take when they wish they could shield a child from the world, but cannot. He told her, "Lena, the world has its habits. Some are good, some are old, and some are unkind. But you must not carry their habits inside you. Carry your truth instead." And so she did. But truth was a complicated thing. Sometimes it was loud, sometimes it was quiet, sometimes it was heavy. Today it felt like a stone she carried in her chest, firm yet unbroken. A passenger approached Helena confidentially, an older woman with silver hair tucked neatly under a wool hat. "Excuse me, dear," she said gently. "Can I ask what happened?" Helena gave a small, polite smile. "They asked me to wait until they verify my ticket." The older woman's brows knitted together. She glanced at the attendant, then back at Helena. "That's strange. You were in the first-class line." "Right, I was," Helena replied softly. The woman hesitated, then touched Helena's arm lightly. A gesture meant not to intrude, but to offer humanity. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It doesn't feel right." Helena nodded, appreciating the simple warmth in the woman's tone. Kindness always carried a different weight than sympathy. It settled differently in the heart. A faint commotion grew at the far end of the concourse. She heard luggage wheels speeding across the tile and the murmur of voices rising. Perhaps the security officer was approaching. Perhaps a supervisor. Perhaps someone else had noticed the tension building. But before anyone reached her, Helena allowed herself a moment to look inward. She looked at her own hands. Strong, steady hands that had signed contracts, built careers, held families together, and comforted friends through grief. These hands had shaped more of her life than any assumption or accusation ever could. The morning light filtered through the tall windows, painting the edges of Helena's silhouette in pale gold. It softened the scene, lending an unexpected gentleness to the tension. Another breath steadied her. She reminded herself of a truth she had learned the hard way. You can't control how the world sees you, but you can choose who you are in every room you enter. And standing here, paused in an airport gate surrounded by strangers and judgment, she still chose to be Helena, calm, thoughtful, unshaken by noise. But she also knew another truth, one that rose quietly in her chest. There were moments when silence was no longer a strategy, moments when dignity had to be defended, not with anger, but with clarity. She lifted her chin slightly. Her eyes sharpened, a subtle but unmistakable shift. The attendant noticed and stiffened. At that very second, Helena knew she would no longer wait for the world to correct itself. She would have to act, not to punish, not to humiliate, but to draw a line with the kind of grace she had spent a lifetime cultivating. The next chapter of this morning had already started forming around her. It would come gently at first, then it would change everything. The murmurs around Gate B14 had deepened, growing into something heavier than simple curiosity. It was the quiet press of discomfort mixed with a sense that the morning had taken an unexpected turn. The air carried a tension that seemed to settle along the glossy floor, slipping around the legs of chairs and weaving between travelers who weren't sure how much attention they were allowed to give. Helena remained still, though the world around her kept shifting. The gate attendant, Rachel Moore, tapped nervously on the counter surface as if trying to remind herself that she was the authority in this space. Her fingers drummed in uneven rhythm, sharp little clicks against the laminate. The sound carved clean slits in the otherwise quiet concourse. A second attendant drifted closer. His name badge read Thomas, but his expression revealed unease rather than control. He whispered something to Rachel that Helena couldn't hear. Rachel responded without looking at him, her chin raised a little too high, her posture strained as though she felt the eyes of the entire terminal resting on her shoulders. Her voice, when she addressed the growing crowd, carried a subtle tremble. "We are verifying some information. Please remain in line." The sentence drifted out, thin and uncertain. It did nothing to calm the tension. If anything, it stirred a low rumble of whispers among waiting passengers. People exchanged looks, quiet conversations folding between them in fragments. "This doesn't make sense. Just scan it. Why didn't she scan it? Someone should say something." Helena took in their faces. She sensed their empathy, their outrage, their caution. But she knew better than to expect strangers to intervene decisively. People often wrestled with their own boundaries, unsure how far they could go without stepping into trouble. She reminded herself not to judge them for it. A soft hum drifted through the terminal as the moving walkway on the far side carried passengers who remained blissfully unaware of the conflict at B14. The distant clatter of a rolling cart from a nearby cafe blended with the faint laughter of a child chasing his mother's suitcase. Ordinary sounds. Everyday moments. It all felt strangely disconnected from the knot forming at the center of Helena's morning. A gentle tap sounded behind her. The older woman with the silver hair had moved closer again, speaking with the quiet firmness of someone who had lived enough life not to fear her own opinions. "Honey, I hate to say it, but this doesn't look right." Helena offered her a small, grateful nod. "Thank you for noticing." The woman sighed softly, pulling her coat tighter around her shoulders. People forget their manners these days, or maybe they forget how to look at someone and see a whole person. Her words settled in Helena's mind, stirring a familiar ache. She had spent years fighting to be seen as whole, not as a symbol, not as an exception, and certainly not as a threat, just a full human being. with a life shaped by discipline, compassion, and quiet strength. Another breeze swept through as the sliding doors at the far end of the concourse opened. A uniformed security officer approached, walking with steady strides that echoed softly across the floor. His vest displayed the airport's emblem, and his brow carried the alert, practiced seriousness of someone entering a situation he had not been fully briefed on. Rachel straightened abruptly, shoulders stiffening, as if the arrival of security granted her validation. She pointed subtly toward Helena before the officer reached the counter. "That's her," she said. The words were sharp enough to slice the moment in two. Conversations around them fell into brief, uneasy silence. The officer shifted his attention toward Helena, his eyes assessing but not accusatory. He approached with a cautious politeness. "Good morning, ma'am. Could I speak with you for a moment?" Helena met his gaze without flinching. "Of course." She stepped forward with the calmness of someone accustomed to adversity. The officer's boots made a soft thud against the polished floor as he stopped at a respectful distance. "We were called because of a situation," he began carefully. Something about a boarding issue before Helena could respond. Rachel interjected quickly. "The ticket may not be valid." She tried to board first class without proper documentation. A sharp inhale rippled through people standing nearby. The older man in the plaid shirt narrowed his eyes. The woman with the stroller clutched the handle more firmly. Her gaze locked on Helena with quiet solidarity. Helena held her boarding pass up in a gentle, open gesture. She spoke clearly, her voice steady, controlled. "The pass is valid. I asked her to scan it, but she refused." Rachel let out a brittle laugh. "It's probably a duplicate," or Thomas, the second attendant, shifted uncomfortably. He looked from Helena to Rachel, then down at the counter. His silence cracked the illusion of certainty Rachel was trying to project. The officer extended a hand toward the document. "May I see it?" "Ma'am." Helena offered it without hesitation. He studied the pass carefully, his eyes flicking across the barcode, the flight number, the seat assignment, the timestamp. His expression grew thoughtful. He lifted his radio slightly, but didn't speak into it. He looked up. "There's nothing unusual on this." Rachel's face froze for a moment, like a mask slipping out of alignment. She forced a tight smile. "Sometimes the system shows invalid data when scanned later. We just need to confirm." Helena remained silent. She let the truth hang, clear and unclouded. The silence that followed carried a subtle power, the kind that doesn't need a raised voice to be felt. A young man standing off to the side spoke up, unable to hold in his frustration. "I've been watching. She didn't even try to scan it." The comment stirred a ripple of quiet agreement among those close enough to have seen. A few nodded. The older woman murmured, "That's exactly what happened." Rachel stiffened. She glanced toward her coworker, hoping for support, but Thomas took a small step back. It wasn't rebellion. It was simply reluctance to disagree with the truth forming around them. Helena's heart tightened. Despite her calm exterior, she felt the tremor of something deeper. Not anger. Not yet. It was the weary recognition of how quickly suspicion could take root, how easily dignity could be stripped in public view. The officer faced Helena again. "Ma'am, if it's okay with you, I'll check your information directly with the system. It'll only take a moment." She nodded. "That's fine." As he walked toward the counter, Helena felt a strange stillness settle inside her. She had reached the crossroads she always dreaded, the moment where she had to decide whether to let the indignity pass quietly or to take a stand. Her father's voice echoed softly in her memory. "Carry your truth." But truth sometimes required action, and sometimes it required drawing a boundary not for yourself alone, but for anyone who would come after you. The officer typed into the system while the tension swirled around them like low clouds gathering before a mountain storm. The clicking of keys, the soft hum of the computer, the shifting of travelers behind Helena, every sound seemed sharpened, amplified. Finally, the officer leaned back slightly, his brows lifting in clear surprise. He looked directly at Rachel. Her ticket is valid, seat U1A, checked in early this morning. No flags. A single sentence. Only that. Yet it cracked the atmosphere open like a fissure running through stone. Rachel's lips parted, but no words came out. Helena inhaled slowly, letting the truth settle. The moment did not feel triumphant. It felt heavy, shaped by the weight of something far older than this morning. She looked at the officer. "Thank you." His nod carried respect, but beneath it, he seemed to sense this situation wasn't finished. Not yet. The first crack had appeared. Soon, the entire morning would shift around it. For a few long seconds, no one at Gate B14 moved. The officer's confirmation hung in the air like a delicate thread stretched between truth and disbelief. People stood frozen in place, waiting to see how the moment would settle. Even the constant hum of the airport seemed quieter, as though the building itself was listening. Helena kept her breathing steady. Her heart rested somewhere between relief and something sharper, a quiet ache that rose whenever she was forced to prove her belonging. It was an ache she had learned to carry with dignity, though it still pressed at the edges of her ribs like a memory she hadn't invited. The older woman beside her exhaled hard, shaking her head slowly. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew you were in the right." Nearby, the young man who had spoken earlier clenched his jaw, frustration simmering in his eyes. He wasn't angry on his own behalf. He was angry on hers. Angry at the sight of injustice sliding across the morning like a long shadow. Rachel seemed unable to move. Her hands hovered above the counter, fingers trembling slightly as she stared at the computer screen as though it had betrayed her. A faint red flush crept up her neck. When she finally spoke, her voice was brittle and paper-thin. There must be some system issue. I was just following protocol." Thomas shifted from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable. He knew the truth. Everyone here knew. Protocol did not include refusing to scan a boarding pass. Protocol did not include making assumptions before checking facts. Helena watched them both, her expression calm but unreadable. She did not raise her voice. She did not lecture. She simply stood there with the quiet authority that came from living through too many moments like this and choosing, every time, not to let the bitterness take root. A soft cry broke the silence. The woman with the stroller rocked her child gently, her voice trembling as she muttered, "People shouldn't be treated this way. Not here. Not anywhere." Her words carried emotion that resonated through the crowd. A few people nodded. Others folded their arms, troubled and thoughtful. The officer cleared his throat. "Thank you for your patience. Dr. Brooks." The use of her title swept through the onlookers like a brief wind stirring autumn leaves. A few passengers straightened, as though hearing her name reframed the entire situation. Helena caught the shift. She had seen it too many times. Respect arrived quickly once people learned who she was, but it never erased what had come before. She offered the officer a small, measured nod. "I appreciate your help." Rachel's eyes flicked up sharply at the title. Her expression twisted with a complex mix of shock, confusion, and something like disbelief. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came. It didn't matter. The moment had already changed shape. The officer stepped aside, leaving space for Helena to approach the boarding area again. But before she moved, someone behind her spoke, their voice firm and unshaken. "This isn't right." It was the older man in the plaid shirt. He stepped forward slightly, his posture no longer hesitant. He turned toward Rachel, then toward the small crowd gathering behind Helena. "You saw her. You judged her. You made her stand there while everyone else boarded. You didn't even try to check." His words were not loud, but they carried a depth that made people listen. Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line. "I didn't judge." The man held up a hand, stopping her. "Everyone here saw what you did." His statement rippled outward, and several passengers murmured their agreement. Some nodded. Others lowered their eyes, uncomfortable but unwilling to deny what they had witnessed. A young woman near the back of the line spoke timidly. I recorded part of it, just in case. Rachel flinched at the mention of a recording. Her shoulders hunched inward, the certainty she had tried to project earlier now slipping away like sand through her fingers. Helena did not look at the woman with the phone, nor at anyone else who might have filmed the moment. She didn't want this to become a public spectacle, though she knew she no longer had control over that possibility. She inhaled softly, letting her breath settle her emotions. Silence, patience, and composure had carried her through countless storms. They would carry her through this one too. Thomas cleared his throat quietly, then turned to Helena. "If you'd like to board now, ma'am, we can welcome you through." His voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the realization that the ground beneath this morning had shifted, and he had seen a part of himself in the uncomfortable reflection it cast. Helena did not move immediately. Instead, she looked around the gate. She saw people watching her with empathy, some with guilt, others with admiration. She saw tired travelers who hadn't expected to be caught in the middle of something that carried more weight than a simple boarding dispute. She took a quiet moment before speaking. Her voice came out low and warm, almost gentle. "I appreciate your help, but I need to be sure something like this doesn't happen to anyone else." Her words were not an accusation. They were a promise, a quiet line drawn with calm steel. Rachel shook her head, defensive now. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." "I was just checking no," a woman interrupted softly. She wasn't. For the first time, the tension took on a different character. It wasn't just frustration anymore. It became collective recognition. People understood that they were standing in the middle of something larger than a travel inconvenience. They were witnessing a moment that revealed something raw and uncomfortable about the world they lived in. The officer looked between the passengers, then back at Helena. He seemed to sense that this was no longer just a misunderstanding. It was becoming a story with consequences. "Let me call a supervisor," he said quietly. Rachel's face drained of color. She opened her mouth again, but the sound that came out was barely more than a whisper. "This isn't fair." Helena felt a small tug in her chest. Despite everything, she did not enjoy seeing fear flicker in Rachel's eyes. She was not someone who took satisfaction from another person's downfall, but accountability was necessary. And moments like this had shaped her life too profoundly for her to ignore them. The crowd began shifting again, but now their stance felt different. People aligned themselves with Helena without needing to say it out loud. Even those who remained silent seemed to carry a shared awareness, an understanding that witnessing mattered. The supervisor arrived a few minutes later, confusion etched across his features. As he approached the counter, Thomas stepped back. Rachel stiffened. The officer gestured toward Helena. The supervisor glanced at Helena, then at the people around her. Something in their expressions told him everything he needed to know before a single word was spoken. "Ma'am, I apologize for any inconvenience," he began. Helena met his eyes steadily. The incident grew larger than inconvenience. It had become a lesson in dignity, a moment held up to the mirrors of strangers. She chose her words carefully. I want to continue my journey today, but I need you to understand what happened here." The supervisor nodded, his face serious now. He turned toward Rachel, who had begun to sink into herself as if bracing for judgment. The conversation that followed would shift the morning again, but for now, the gate felt suspended in a fragile hush. The crowd had found its voice, and soon, the consequences would follow. The supervisor's presence steadied the atmosphere, but it did not dissolve the tension. If anything, it illuminated it, casting light on everything that had been quietly simmering beneath the surface. Travelers continued to watch, their faces reflecting the weight of what they had witnessed. The morning had grown thick with something unspoken, a shared recognition that this moment carried more than inconvenience. Helena stood still, her posture composed, though her soul felt heavy. Her boarding pass remained tucked between her fingers, yet it no longer felt like a simple ticket. It had become a symbol that pulled threads from her past and tied them to the present. The quiet ache she held inside deepened, pressing at the delicate places she rarely allowed herself to feel. The supervisor cleared his throat carefully. He glanced at the gate attendants, then at the officer, then finally at Helena. His tone was formal yet softer than Rachel's, as if he understood that respect meant more than procedure. "Dr. Brooks, thank you for your patience. I'd like to understand exactly what happened." Rachel straightened, clasping her hands in front of her. Her voice came out quickly. She stepped into the first-class line without verifying. Thomas finally spoke, his quiet voice cutting through hers. She tried to verify it. "Rachel, you didn't scan anything." Rachel's jaw tightened. That's because Thomas didn't let her finish. He turned toward the supervisor, still not meeting Helena's eyes. She presented her boarding pass. Rachel told her to wait. She didn't check the system first. His admission trembled slightly, but it was honest. The truth, once spoken aloud, seemed to stretch across the gate like a fine thread weaving the passengers together. The supervisor looked at Helena with an expression that carried both apology and something deeper, a recognition that this had not been a misunderstanding. This had been a choice. Helena exhaled softly. The breath left her chest in a slow stream, as if carrying years of similar moments she had endured quietly. She felt the familiar sting behind her ribs, a sting born from memories that lived beyond this morning. She was no longer seeing the airport. She was seeing the faint outline of her past. Her mother standing in a school hallway, gently smoothing the curls in young Helena's hair, while a teacher insisted she had accidentally placed her in an accelerated class. Her father gripping her shoulders after she was followed around a store for no reason other than the color of her skin. Her first graduate seminar, where a professor refused to call her Dr. Brooks even after she earned her title. Those moments gathered at the edges of her vision, soft but insistent. They whispered of battles fought quietly. They whispered of dignity preserved in silence. They whispered of the cost of being judged before being known. But they also whispered of strength. She returned to the present slowly, letting the airport regain its shape around her. The high ceilings, the cold light, the scattered conversations, all of it blended back into place. The supervisor spoke gently. "Dr. Brooks, I truly apologize for the way this was handled. You should not have been asked to wait. Certainly not like this." Helena didn't answer immediately. She turned slightly, taking in the watching faces. Some carried anger on her behalf. Others carried sadness. Many seemed unsure how to process the weight of what they had seen. Then her eyes fell on Rachel. The younger woman stood stiffly, her face pale now. The confidence she had displayed at the beginning of the morning gone. Fear flickered beneath her expression. It wasn't loud, but Helena could see it, could feel it. And that was when a different kind of ache touched her heart. She knew what it felt like to be humiliated publicly. She knew what it felt like to have a moment spiral too quickly, far beyond what anyone intended. She knew how shame could steal breath from a person, but this was not the same ache as before. This one came from compassion. Compassion didn't erase wrongdoing. It didn't excuse it. But it did create space to understand that people often acted out of their own shadows. Helena lifted her chin slightly, her voice soft. I don't want a scene. I don't want anger. I want fairness. The words settled gently, like a folded cloth placed over a wound not yet healed. The supervisor nodded slowly. I understand, though there will need to be an internal review. Rachel's eyes widened, her voice cracking. Please, I didn't mean... Her sentence crumbled. She swallowed hard, pressing her lips together. For the first time since this began, she looked at Helena directly. Her eyes glistened with something close to remorse. I'm sorry, she whispered. The apology was small, but it trembled with sincerity. A ripple seemed to move through the passengers. The woman with the stroller blinked back sudden emotion. The young man who had been recording lowered his phone slightly, lowering his guard as well. Helena didn't answer immediately. Her thoughts drifted again, slower this time, like soft currents moving through deep water. She remembered another man who had apologized to her years ago after a similar moment. She remembered how she had chosen to forgive him not because he fully deserved it, but because she deserved peace. Because she refused to let bitterness shape her future. Compassion, her mother once said, is not weakness. It is choosing the harder road. Helena breathed in gently. The scent of airport coffee lingered faintly in the air. A child's laugh echoed from a nearby seating area. The world had not stopped turning. She looked at Rachel with calm steadiness. What matters to me is that you understand why this was wrong. Rachel nodded quickly, her voice shaking. I do. I really do. The supervisor watched silently, absorbing the moment. He then turned toward Helena again. Would you like to board now? Doctor? Brooks Helena hesitated. Not because she feared boarding, not because she wanted more acknowledgement, but because another quiet battle was unfolding inside her, the battle between letting the moment pass and taking action to prevent it from repeating. She felt the weight of her responsibility, not as a CEO, not as a public figure, but as a woman who had walked through too many moments like this to ignore the pattern. She spoke slowly, choosing truth over anger. I'll board, but after the flight, I'd like to speak with someone from your leadership team. The supervisor straightened, understanding the seriousness beneath her calm. Of course. I'll arrange that. Helena gave a small nod, the kind that carried finality. The gathering crowd relaxed slightly. Now that the path forward had been identified, people murmured to each other in low voices, still deeply affected by the unfolding events. As Helena moved toward the podium, the young man with the phone approached her quietly. I'm really sorry you had to go through this, ma'am. She looked at him, her expression softening. Thank you, but don't be sorry for me. Be aware. He nodded slowly, letting the words settle in him like a seed. Helena stepped toward the boarding area. The hum of the jet bridge drifted faintly toward her, a reminder that the world beyond this gate still existed, waiting. But before she crossed the threshold, something tugged inside her again, a whisper of memory, a reminder that her past was not separate from this moment. It had shaped her, sharpened her, strengthened her. The heart remembers what the world tries to forget. And Helena Brooks remembered everything. The jet bridge remained open, humming faintly as cold morning air drifted through its narrow passage. Helena could have stepped forward, crossed into the quiet world of the waiting aircraft, and left the tension behind her. Yet something in her heart held her in place, a sense that the moment had not finished unfolding, She paused at the podium, her fingertips brushing the edge of the smooth counter. Her gaze remained steady, though her breath felt thick in her chest, weighted by the stress of what she had endured. She watched the supervisor step back to radio his team, his face lined with growing worry. He spoke in clipped, murmur-like phrases, each sentence carrying more urgency than the last. The security officer stayed close, though respectfully distant. He kept an eye on the scene with the quiet attentiveness of someone who understood too late that a situation he entered calmly had been far more complex than what was described to him. Passengers continued to linger nearby. Many pretended to reorganize their bags or adjust scarves and jackets, but their eyes remained fixed on Helena. They were drawn to her presence, to the quiet way she held her ground. She did not demand attention, yet she commanded the space around her simply by choosing not to shrink. Rachel, meanwhile, had folded into herself. Her shoulders slumped, her hands fidgeted with the hem of her blouse. The red flush that once surged across her face had faded into something subdued and colorless. She avoided looking at anyone. Avoided looking at Helena. Thomas stayed a few steps away from her, his face troubled. He seemed younger now, almost boyish, as though the weight of mourning had pressed too hard against his conscience. The supervisor ended his radio conversation and returned with a heavy sigh. The airline's regional operations manager is on the way down. He wants to speak with all of us. Rachel's eyes fluttered shut for a moment. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed hard. The officer shifted slightly, as though bracing himself for a confrontation he had not anticipated being part of. Helena let her fingers fall from the counter and folded her hands calmly in front of her. She nodded. "Thank you." Despite her poise, she felt the pressure building behind her sternum. She could feel the familiar internal tremor that always followed moments of conflict. It was not fear, nor anger. It was something older, something that came from a place deep within her history. A voice rose from behind. The older man in the plaid shirt stepped forward again. His tone was quiet but strong. If they think they can brush this aside, they're wrong. We all saw what happened. His statement was met with several agreeing murmurs. The woman with the stroller nodded, bouncing her child gently as she spoke. People need to be treated with respect, especially someone who did nothing wrong. The young man with the phone softened his expression. He leaned toward Helena. If they need witness statements, I'll give one. Helena gave him a gentle nod, touched by the sincerity in his voice. Thank you. She didn't crave validation from strangers, but their solidarity stirred something warm inside her. It reminded her that even when the world faltered, there were always people willing to stand with those who had been wronged. Minutes passed with the slow crawl of an overcast morning. Each second added another layer of pressure to the atmosphere. The conversations faded into a softer hum as travelers resumed their paths or returned to their seats. But many continued to watch Helena, sensing that the moment was about to shift again. Footsteps echoed across the concourse, firm and rapid. A tall man in a navy suit approached the gate with an air of urgency. His badge identified him as the regional operations manager. His expression revealed a blend of concern and controlled frustration, the kind found in people who had been alerted to a crisis unfolding too close to home. He reached the gate, scanned the group, then looked directly at Helena. Dr. Brooks. She inclined her head slightly. Yes. He extended a hand in apology rather than greeting. I am deeply sorry for what you've experienced. I came as soon as I was informed. His tone was respectful, but beneath it lived a frantic energy. It was the kind of energy found in leaders who recognize the magnitude of an incident only after it was too late to prevent it. Helena accepted the handshake with grace. Thank you for coming. He turned immediately toward his staff, His eyes landed on Rachel, who stiffened under the weight of his stare. His voice was steady, but stern enough to slice through the remaining silence. "Walk me through exactly what happened." Rachel opened her mouth, but only a strained whisper emerged. She glanced at Helena, then at the passengers who still lingered. Her composure crumbled. "I made a mistake." The manager didn't look satisfied. "A mistake is entering the wrong code. This looks more serious." Thomas stepped forward, speaking more firmly than before. She refused to scan Dr. Brooks' ticket. She told her to wait before checking anything. The manager's jaw clenched. Rachel's eyes filled again. "I didn't mean to." "I didn't think," he interrupted quietly. "You didn't think you needed to check." Rachel's face drained. Her shoulders folded inward. She looked small, lost, like a candle shrinking against the cold draft of consequences. The manager breathed in deeply, then turned back to Helena. "Dr. Brooks, the company owes you a direct and sincere apology. This is not the standard we uphold." Helena's voice was soft. "I appreciate your acknowledgement." Her words were calm, but a storm brewed inside her chest. The moment had grown too big, too fast. It carried echoes of history and the residue of countless quiet wounds. She felt the weight of it in her bones. The manager continued, his tone heavy. "There will be disciplinary action, proper training, immediate review." Rachel gasped softly, hands trembling. "I'm sorry, Dr. Brooks, truly." Helena looked at her quietly. She saw fear. Yes, she saw guilt, but she also saw youth, inexperience, the reflection of a system that had shaped her without teaching her better. The ache in Helena's chest deepened. It was the kind of ache that came when justice and compassion pulled in opposite directions. She spoke slowly. "This moment carries pain on both sides. I won't pretend otherwise." Everyone around her fell silent. Helena continued, "But what matters is that we learn from it. All of us." Rachel's tears fell silently now, slipping down her cheeks like tiny beads of regret. The manager nodded to Helena, gratitude softening his stern expression. "Thank you for your understanding." Helena inhaled deeply, grounding herself. She could feel her heartbeat settling again, though the heaviness remained. She knew this was only one part of the story. The next steps, the decisions she would make after the flight, would define everything that followed. For now, though, she simply folded her boarding pass into her palm and stepped toward the entrance of the jet bridge. Her walk was slow, measured. Each step carried the weight of the morning while allowing space for what would come next. Behind her, the gate attendants whispered. The manager spoke rapidly into his phone. Passengers watched her leave, admiration softening their expressions. But Helena kept moving. Not out of triumph or relief. She moved because she had lived through too many moments like this to let any one of them define her. The air inside the jet bridge was cooler, quieter. The narrow walkway carried the faint smell of metal and clean recycled sky. The hum of the aircraft waited at the far end, promising a brief sanctuary before the next wave of consequences. The truth had been revealed. The system had been challenged. But the morning was far from over. The air inside the jet bridge felt calmer, but Helena knew the morning was only gathering itself for another turn. She walked slowly, allowing each step to settle the weight that had pressed against her for the last 20 minutes. Her breath rose in steady, controlled patterns, but the tension beneath her ribs had not left. It lingered like a shadow, a familiar companion she had carried through much of her life. The aircraft door stood open ahead of her, and a flight attendant waited with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The woman's name tag read Emily. She gestured politely. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Brooks." Helena nodded gently, passing by her without judgment. The cabin's warm lighting enveloped her, offering a hint of comfort. Soft leather seats lined the first-class section, and the faint scent of brewed coffee floated through the air. It was quiet, peaceful, almost too gentle compared to the tension she left behind at Gate B14. She placed her tote bag beneath the seat and sat down in 1A. The cushion eased under her weight, but she felt no relief. Her hands rested still on her lap, fingers gently interlaced. She closed her eyes briefly, not out of exhaustion, but out of reflection. The morning had already exposed more than she wished to confront. Old scars, quiet memories, the subtle fractures of living in a world that often questioned her place in it. But she also felt something else now, something sharper. Not anger, exactly. Not sorrow. It was a calm, focused resolve. Her phone vibrated once inside her coat. The sound was faint, subtle enough to be lost beneath the soft hum of the cabin. Helena opened her eyes, inhaled gently, and reached for it. A single notification glowed against the screen. A message from her chief operations officer, Marcus Hale. It contained only 4 words. "Are you boarding?" Yet Helena's heartbeat tightened. She typed a short response. "Almost." Marcus replied instantly. "We have a situation." Helena straightened in her seat. She could feel the morning preparing to shift again, the way clouds gather before rain. She typed back carefully. "What happened?" There was a pause, then another message appeared. Sky West Legal just emailed. They want to confirm if you suspended the fuel transition contract. Their board is panicking. Helena's breath stalled. The contract. $4.1 billion. Months of negotiation. Years of planning. She had paused it with a single instruction earlier that morning, sent from a place of clarity and quiet outrage. Now, the consequences were rising swiftly, racing toward her like a storm breaking across open plains. Another message appeared. "I need to know if this is intentional. Helena, the entire executive team is on standby. If you reversed it by accident, I'll call their director immediately." Helena stared at the message. For a brief moment, the surrounding cabin blurred as her thoughts deepened into quiet calculation. The memory of Rachel's dismissal of her, the stares, the echoes of old wounds, the way she had been required once again to defend her very presence. She remembered her father's words. "Carry your truth." She remembered her mother's voice. "Choose compassion when you can. Choose strength when you must." She typed slowly. It was intentional. The reply from Marcus arrived almost instantly, heavy with disbelief. "Do you want me to notify their board?" Helena looked at the empty seat beside her. The aisle. The muted glow of the cabin lights. She felt the subtle rumble beneath her feet as passengers finished boarding farther back. The aircraft felt like the center of a quiet waiting period, a pause between breaths. She typed back, "Wait, I'll speak with them myself after we land." Marcus's final message appeared. "Understood. Whatever you need, I'm with you." Helena locked her phone and set it gently on the armrest. A slow, steady breath left her lungs. The decision she had made earlier was no longer just a private response to humiliation. It had become a seismic shift in how the airline would face accountability. She leaned back in her seat, eyes lifting to the small overhead air vent. Cool air drifted down, brushing her cheeks softly. She let her thoughts collect themselves like leaves gathering in a slow-moving stream. She wondered how many times people like her had endured similar moments quietly, without power, without witness, without recourse. How many mornings had carried the same weight, the same ache, the same silent humiliation? She had felt it before. But this morning, something within her had refused silence. A gentle knock on her consciousness pulled her back. Emily, the flight attendant, approached cautiously. Her posture was polite, but there was a twitch of unease in her expression. "Dr. Brooks, would you like something to drink before takeoff?" Helena offered a small smile. "Not right now, thank you." Emily nodded and stepped away, yet her tension was noticeable. Helena wondered how much of the earlier incident had reached the crew. News traveled quickly through airport staff, faster still when a supervisor was involved. Helena's gaze drifted toward the aisle. A few passengers stepping into first class glanced at her, their expressions curious, respectful, empathetic. They had not seen what had happened at the gate, but something in the air suggested they sensed an unspoken story. A rustling of paper pulled Helena's attention to her tote bag. She reached down and pulled out a thin folder, one she always traveled with. Inside were notes about the sustainability initiative she was presenting later that day in Utah. She slid the folder open, expecting comfort in routine, but her mind refused to settle. Her heart tugged her inward, into places she did not often allow herself to revisit. Memories slipped softly across her thoughts, like faint shadows cast against a wall. She remembered being 12, sitting alone on a playground bench after another student told her she didn't belong in the honors program. She had tried so hard to hide the hurt, but her father found her there, silent and trembling. He sat beside her without saying a word at first. After a long pause, he told her something she never forgot. Sometimes people see skin before they see soul. But you, Lena, you must always see soul first, in yourself and in others. She let that memory settle in her chest, soothing but bittersweet. Her eyes drifted to the aisle again, where the regional operations manager now stood quietly with the supervisor at the cabin entrance. Their hushed conversation was too far for Helena to hear, but their glances made it clear the situation was escalating beyond the gate. Then something unexpected happened. Emily approached again, her hands clasped nervously. "Dr. Brooks, I heard there was an issue before boarding. I just want to say that I'm sorry for whatever you experienced. I know it's not my place, but I didn't want to stay silent." Her voice was soft, sincere. Helena blinked slowly, moved by the gesture. "Thank you, Emily. That's very kind. If there's anything you need, anything at all, please let me know." Helena nodded gently. When Emily walked away, Helena felt a shift within herself, a reminder that even in painful moments, kindness still found its way forward. She folded her hands in her lap again and exhaled. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the final passengers boarded. A man placed his carry-on in the overhead bin and gave Helena a respectful nod before sitting in 2C. She returned the gesture quietly. Yet, despite the growing calm of the aircraft, Helena sensed the morning standing at the edge of another turning point, a deeper shift, a larger consequence. Her phone vibrated again. A new message, this time from a contact she rarely heard from directly. "Sky West Board Chair, Dr. Brooks, we urgently request a conversation. Please confirm availability." Helena's pulse tightened. The world outside was moving quickly now, and she knew she could not turn back. This morning was no longer just about a boarding incident. It was about dignity, power, and truth. A truth she could no longer carry quietly. The aircraft settled into a hush as the last passengers found their seats. Overhead, bins clicked shut one by one, and the soft glow of the cabin lights washed the space in a gentle amber warmth. Yet, despite the calm around her, Helena felt the atmosphere shift again, like a tide drawing itself back before a powerful wave. She held her phone loosely, staring at the message from the Sky West board chair. The words seemed to carry their own gravity, heavier than the quiet engine hum beneath her feet. She read the message again, slower this time, as if letting each syllable sink into her bloodstream. We urgently request a conversation. Please confirm availability. Her thoughts tightened. This was no small request. This was the kind of message that came when a corporation sensed the ground trembling beneath it. Helena set the phone gently on her lap. The screen dimmed, leaving only her reflection for a moment. She watched the softness of her expression and the tension behind her eyes. It struck her how many battles she had carried in silence, how many times she had walked into boardrooms with her head held high while her spirit bore the bruises of quiet prejudice. Across the aisle, the man in 2C shifted slightly, adjusting his seatbelt. He glanced at her with a kind of respectful curiosity, sensing something stirring beneath her calm. Then he turned away politely, giving her space. Emily moved through the cabin with practiced grace, checking seatbelts and offering final reassurances. Her expression carried a warmth that hadn't been there earlier. She seemed determined to create a cocoon of comfort around Helena, as though trying to compensate for the morning's wound. The captain's voice soon drifted through the cabin speakers, deep and steady. "Good morning, folks. We're just waiting for final clearance from ground operations. We appreciate your patience." His words floated through the air, but Helena sensed an undercurrent. Something was delaying the flight, something connected to her. She inhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing gently at her chest. Her phone vibrated again. This time, the message came from Marcus. "SkyWest is requesting a full board call before takeoff. They won't wait until you land." Helena felt the air shift around her. The pressure, the urgency, the fear behind corporate formality. She typed back with steady fingers. "Let them call. I'm here." She locked her phone once more and looked forward, letting the cabin lights blur softly. Her pulse steadied with intention. Whatever came next, she would meet it without flinching. Minutes passed. Then, a subtle murmur rose at the front of the plane. Helena saw the regional operations manager step inside the aircraft quietly, speaking to Emily in hushed tones. Emily's eyes widened, then softened with concern as she glanced discreetly toward Helena. The manager approached slowly, respectful of the space around her. "Dr. Brooks, may I speak with you for a moment?" Helena nodded calmly. "Yes." He leaned slightly closer, his tone deliberately gentle. "Their board is asking for a direct conversation before we can push back from the gate. They've requested your participation." Helena absorbed the words quietly. She felt the weight of every watching eye in the cabin. Though she did not turn to meet them, she kept her voice soft, controlled. "Is there a private space?" The manager nodded. "We've arranged a call from the galley. You'll have privacy." Helena's heartbeat steadied. She rose slowly, gathering her phone, smoothing the front of her blazer with quiet grace. As she stepped into the aisle, she noticed the small waves of emotion ripple across the passengers around her. Concern, admiration, curiosity, but no pity, never pity. Emily guided her toward the front galley, her expression sincere. "If you need anything at all, Dr. Brooks, please ask." Helena offered a small nod. "Thank you." The galley felt narrower, cooler, wrapped in muted stainless steel surfaces that reflected the dim cabin lighting. The sounds of boarding faded as the manager handed her a headset connected to a corporate conference line. He stepped back respectfully, giving her space. Helena slipped the headset on. The sound of a distant chime indicated the call had connected. A voice came through, formal but strained. "Dr. Brooks, this is Alan Coates, chair of the SkyWest board. Thank you for joining us on such short notice." Another voice followed, sharper. "We understand you have concerns regarding this morning's incident." A third voice chimed in, calmer but urgent. "And we want to resolve this quickly to ensure our partnership remains intact." Helena closed her eyes for a brief moment. Her breath steadied, the same way she steadied herself before major presentations, before congressional hearings, before protest where she stood between injustice and its shadows. She opened her eyes and spoke with a voice that flowed like calm water. I didn't pause your contract for leverage. I did it because dignity matters, not just mine. Everyone's. Silence spread through the call. A long, heavy silence. Helena continued, letting her words carry the quiet force that defined her soul. This morning, your staff dismissed me without cause. They questioned my right to be where I belonged. That experience isn't new, but what matters is what happens now. A nervous cough echoed through the line. One voice tried to interject. Dr. Brooks, we deeply regret. She gently cut in. Regret is a feeling. I need to know your actions. The silence returned, deeper, more fragile. Then the chair spoke again. We are reviewing the employee's conduct. Immediate corrective action is being taken. You have our word that this will not be ignored. Helena listened carefully. The words were measured, polished. They carried the anxiety of a corporation facing a crisis it did not anticipate. But she needed more. Not for herself, but for every traveler who had been dismissed quietly, for every person forced to choose silence. She spoke slowly, with intention. I don't want retribution. I want reform. Her words lingered. Dignity, training for your staff, bias assessments, better accountability, real change. If we are to continue our partnership, I need assurance that no one else will experience what I did today. The chair inhaled audibly. Then you have it. In writing, before noon. Helena's pulse eased. Thank you, another voice added, more humbled. Dr. Brooks, your leadership is deeply appreciated. She ended the call with a quiet certainty. The headset clicked softly as she removed it. The regional manager stood nearby, waiting, his face pale from the knowledge of what was now unfolding at a higher level than any of them expected. Helena offered a small, calm nod. The call is finished. He bowed his head slightly. Thank you, Dr. Brooks. She returned to her seat slowly. When she stepped into the aisle, the passengers watched her with quiet reverence. Not because she was dramatic or loud, but because there was strength in her stillness. A strength that felt ancient, rooted, undeniable. She sat down in her seat, smoothing her skirt, settling her phone beside her. Emily approached once more, her voice softening. Would you like that drink now? Dr. Brooks. Helena closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with a gentle smile. Yes. Tea, please. Chamomile? Emily nodded. Right away. The cabin dimmed fully now as the plane prepared for departure. Lights softened, passengers settled deeper into their seats, and the engines hummed with a consistent rhythm. Helena felt the sky calling to her again, and she knew this morning had changed more than an airline policy. It had changed the air itself. The sky would not forget. The cabin grew quieter as the aircraft finally eased back from the gate. The soft rumble beneath the floor vibrated through Helena's shoes, a slow and steady rhythm that felt almost meditative. It was the kind of sound people usually ignored, but today it resonated with her like a calm heartbeat after a storm. She leaned back in her seat, fingers gently curled around the warm cup Emily had brought her. The chamomile released a soft floral scent that rose with the steam, soothing the tension that still lingered in her chest. She lifted the cup to her lips and took a slow sip. The warmth drifted across her tongue and sank into her body, coaxing her breath to settle. Outside the window, the morning sky stretched wide and pale. A thin layer of clouds hovered above the mountains, tinted faintly by early sunlight. It was beautiful in a way that demanded silence, a beauty that felt honest. Across the aisle, the man in 2C watched the view as well, though discreetly. His posture had softened, his expression thoughtful. When Helena glanced his way, he offered a gentle nod, respectful and quiet. She returned it softly. The engines deepened their hum as the aircraft made its slow turn toward the runway. The motion felt smooth, deliberate, like the beginning of a long exhale. For the first time since the confrontation at the gate, Helena felt her pulse slow enough to remind her she was still human beneath the layers of responsibility. She rested her palm on her lap and allowed her gaze to drift. Her mind replayed the call she had just ended, not word for word, but emotionally. She could still feel the trembling beneath the surface of the board members' voices, the anxiety of leadership suddenly forced to see what it had overlooked. She had spoken calmly, but her words had landed like stones dropped into deep water. Their ripples would spread far beyond this aircraft. She wondered what Rachel was doing now, whether she was sitting somewhere in the break room, her face buried in her hands, whether she was replaying the moment the way Helena had replayed similar moments in her own childhood, whether she felt shame, fear, regret. Compassion tugged at Helena again. It always did, even when she wished it came less easily. The plane turned onto the runway. The engines rose in pitch. Helena tightened her seatbelt gently and placed her hands on her thighs, steadying herself. Emily passed through the aisle one last time, checking seat backs, giving Helena a small reassuring smile. The jet paused for a breath, then surged forward. The acceleration pressed Helena back into her seat as the plane rushed across the ground, gathering strength. The rumble deepened, then lifted into something smooth and weightless. The cabin tilted upward. The ground slipped away. Clouds met them softly. Helena exhaled, her eyes drifting closed. The weight of the morning seemed to dissolve a little in the ascent, left behind on the tarmac like something she no longer needed to carry. But the truth was, she still carried it, just differently. Once the aircraft leveled out, the cabin lights brightened slightly, people shifted in their seats, pulling out books, adjusting headphones, settling into the comfort of a long flight. The man in 2C had opened a newspaper, though he seemed more interested in thinking than reading. Emily moved quietly through the aisles. When she reached Helena again, she lowered her voice. "Let me know if you want anything else. Dr. Brooks." Helena nodded. "Thank you, Emily." The flight attendant lingered for a moment as though wanting to say more. Then she hesitated. "Can I ask something?" Helena looked up gently. "Of course." Emily clasped her hands in front of her, choosing her words carefully. "Does this happen often, to you?" Helena let out a soft breath. She looked at the woman's face and saw sincerity, not intrusion. So she answered honestly. "It does not always look the same. But yes, often enough that I recognize the pattern before it finishes unfolding." Emily's eyes softened with a pain that did not belong to her, but still felt real. "I wish it didn't." Helena offered a small, grateful smile. "So do I." Emily nodded slowly, then returned to the galley. The weight of their short exchange lingered in the air, quiet but meaningful. It was a moment of acknowledgement, a moment of humanity. The kind that often arrived too late in the world, yet still carried significance when it finally came. Helena shifted in her seat and rested her head gently against the cushion. The hum of the engines became a steady lullaby, guiding her thoughts into deeper places. She remembered something her grandmother used to say during long summers in Georgia, a phrase spoken in the soft twilight between day and night. "The sky does not keep secrets. It remembers what we forget." Helena had always thought it was a poetic way of teaching children to be honest. But now, sitting thousands of feet above the earth, she understood it differently. The sky held truth. Every tear, every triumph, every quiet act of courage drifted upward like a memory the world could not erase. The morning's wound still ached inside her, but she no longer felt exposed. Instead, she felt anchored, rooted in something larger than one confrontation, larger than her own life. Her phone vibrated softly on the armrest. She reached for it slowly. Marcus had sent a new message. Board wants a second call after landing. Press offices are already reaching out. Are you okay? Helena smiled faintly. Marcus always asked the important question. Last. She typed back, I'm fine. Just thinking. He responded instantly. About what Helena looked out the window again. The clouds stretched endlessly beneath the aircraft, soft and pale like brushed cotton. Far below, glimpses of the earth flickered through breaks in the cloud cover, rivers like silver threads, highways that looked like small scratches in the landscape. Everything felt distant, quiet, manageable. She typed one word, everything. Then she set the phone down and folded her hands in her lap again. She let silence wrap around her like a warm blanket. A silence that did not suffocate. A silence that healed. The man in 2C spoke gently across the aisle. If you do not mind me saying, you carry yourself with remarkable grace. She looked at him, surprised but not startled. Her voice was soft. Thank you. It comes from years of practice. He smiled sadly. That is the part that troubles me. Helena understood. She gave a small nod. He continued. I saw how they spoke to you at the gate. I did not hear everything, but I saw the disrespect. I am sorry that you had to go through that. Helena lifted her cup again, warming her hands against the ceramic. That morning's ache stirred again, but gently this time. Maybe because someone else noticed. Maybe because he cared enough to acknowledge it. She nodded. Thank you. The man leaned back, giving her space. His empathy lingered in the air like warm light. Helena closed her eyes once more, letting the moment settle inside her. She knew more challenges waited when the plane landed. More calls, more decisions, more weight. But she also knew something else. Dignity was not fragile. Truth was not delicate. Strength was quiet, but absolute. She inhaled slowly, letting the sky hold her thoughts. Outside the window, sunlight broke through a layer of clouds, casting a soft golden glow through the cabin. The sky remembered. And so did she. The aircraft drifted steadily through the morning sky, its engines humming in a quiet rhythm that made everything inside feel suspended between past and future. Helena sat still, the empty teacup resting near her fingertips. The warmth had faded from it, but the comfort it offered lingered faintly in her chest. She gazed out the window again. Wisps of clouds shimmered like soft veils across the expanse of blue, stretching toward the horizon with a calm that did not belong to the world she had left behind. Up here, everything felt far away. The confrontation, the apology, the corporate fear, the call she had just taken. All of it drifted like echoes that had not yet learned to fade. Still, Helena sensed something stirring beneath the quiet, a shift, a pressure, a truth she had carried for years but rarely confronted directly. She pressed her palm gently against her sternum. The ache had not disappeared. It had only softened, like a bruise touched by sunlight. She could still feel the sting of Rachel's voice, the dismissal behind it, the shadow it had cast over the morning. But she also felt something deeper, something older. She remembered being 17, sitting on the edge of her bed after returning from a school debate competition. She had won first place, yet one of the judges had questioned whether she wrote her own speech. Her father had found her in the dark, her face buried in her hands. He sat beside her without turning on the light. He simply rested his hand on her shoulder. "Baby girl," he whispered, "the world does not always see you clearly, but you must see yourself clearly." That memory rose now like a slow, steady tide filling her chest. The man in 2C gently folded his newspaper and leaned back. Helena could sense his glance again, a quiet curiosity softened by respect. He did not speak further, but the weight of his empathy stayed near her like a warm presence. A soft chime rang through the cabin. Emily's voice came through the speakers, warm and calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, we expect smooth air for the next hour. Please relax and enjoy the flight." Her tone held a kindness that felt personal, as if she had spoken directly to Helena without using her name. Helena closed her eyes. Her breath swayed gently with the motion of the plane. She allowed herself a moment of stillness, letting the silence wrap around her. But silence had never been empty for her. It always carried layers of memory, layers of resilience. Her phone vibrated softly again. Another message. This time from a familiar contact. Senator Marla Jensen. Helena blinked slowly. Surprised. Marla rarely messaged her during business trips unless something urgent was unfolding. Helena opened the notification, her pulse tightening. "Just saw the internal notice from SkyWest leadership. Call me when you land. I heard something happened." Helena exhaled gradually. News traveled faster than oxygen in her world. She typed back, "I will call you after the next board meeting." She placed the phone aside, her hand lingering atop it for a moment. The ache inside her shifted again. This incident had already grown far beyond the gate, beyond the airport, beyond the flight itself, and she knew how quickly stories like this spread when the person at the center had power, influence, a voice people could not easily dismiss. But she also knew something else. Power had a cost. Courage had a cost. She felt that cost now like a soft pressure above her lungs. Emily approached again, walking with a gentleness that felt unusually deliberate. She leaned down slightly. "Dr. Brooks, the captain asked if you are comfortable. He wanted me to check on you." Helena offered a small smile. "I'm all right. Thank you." Emily hesitated, her eyes searching Helena's face with cautious sympathy. "If you need any extra privacy or help with calls, just say so. We'll make it happen." That level of attentiveness was not typical. It came from awareness, from recognition, from the way people respond when they realize they've witnessed something painful and profound. Helena's voice was warm. "You've been very kind." "Emily." "I appreciate it." The attendant nodded and returned to the galley. Helena leaned her head back and let her thoughts drift farther inward. She thought of her team, her employees, her parents, her younger self who once cried in silence after being followed around a department store, her adult self who had fought her way into boardrooms where no one else looked like her, her public self who carried a brand of confidence that the world respected but rarely understood. She whispered inside her mind, "I am tired of these moments. Not tired in anger, but weary. Weary from the weight of being strong so often." She opened her eyes again as the man in 2C leaned slightly toward her. "If you do not mind," he said quietly, "what you did earlier, it took courage." Helena studied him, her brow softening. She didn't know his name, didn't know his profession, but she sensed sincerity, the kind that came from lived experience, not from pity. She responded gently. "Sometimes courage just means refusing to step back." He nodded slowly, or refusing to shrink. A faint smile touched her lips. He continued, his voice thoughtful. "I teach at a community college. Many of my students face similar things. They would be proud of you." The warmth in his tone reached her like a hand held out in solidarity. She felt something inside her shift. Loosen. Soften. "Thank you," she said softly. He returned to his seat with quiet dignity. The cabin lights dimmed further as the flight entered smoother air. The hum of the engine softened into a calm vibration that filled the space without demanding attention. Helena opened her folder again. Not to read the documents, but to anchor herself to something familiar. The crisp paper, the printed lines, the notes she had written in the margins the night before, full of vision and purpose. Her work had always been her anchor. Her mission had always guided her. The world's pain had always pushed her forward rather than back. She stayed like that for several minutes, her breathing slow, her thoughts calm. Then her phone vibrated once more. A message from someone unexpected. Rachel. The name on the screen froze Helena's breath for a moment. She hesitated, feeling a ripple of emotion she could not immediately name. She tapped the message open. "I'm so sorry for what I did. I know you have every reason to be angry. I was wrong. Thank you for not embarrassing me when you could have. I don't know why I acted that way. I hope someday you can forgive me." Helena's throat tightened. Not with anger, with something quieter. She stared at the words for a long while. Long enough to feel them settle. Rachel had written from a place of vulnerability, a place Helena recognized intimately. People often folded inward only after being forced to confront their own reflection. She typed slowly. "I believe people can learn. That is enough for now." She pressed send. When she placed the phone down again, her chest felt heavier and lighter at the same time. Compassion could be its own kind of weight, but it was one she chose willingly. Outside the window, sunlight spilled across the wing in a golden wash. The sky widened, endless and bright. Helena breathed in deeply, the air filling her with quiet strength. Courage had a cost. Compassion had a cost. But she also understood something more profound. Dignity was priceless, and she would never relinquish hers. The flight continued forward with the gentle steadiness of a vessel moving through a sky that seemed almost too calm for the weight pressing on Helena's heart. She rested her palms together lightly, fingertips touching as if in reflection. The cabin felt quieter now, almost reverent, as though every sound softened itself out of respect for the moment unfolding around her. She inhaled deeply, letting the familiar hum of the aircraft settle her thoughts. Each breath steadied her. Each exhale drew tension from her shoulders and released it into the stillness around her. Her eyes drifted again toward the window where light stretched across the sky in wide silver ribbons. The sun had climbed higher, brightening the world below in soft glimmers. Yet, despite the beauty outside, Helena's mind was anchored within. She could not shake the message from Rachel, nor the call with Sky West, nor the quiet ache of all the moments that had led her to this one. She pulled her hands into her lap and let her fingers trace one another gently, a small grounding gesture she rarely used in public. But this morning had stripped her defenses in a way she had not anticipated. It had pressed against her memories, stirred old bruises, resurrected the weight of history that never fully slept. The man in 2C glanced her way again, concern lingering in his expression. He did not interrupt, only offered a quiet presence. Helena appreciated that. Sometimes the most powerful support was silent. Emily returned once more, crouching slightly beside Helena's seat. "Dr. Brooks, I do not want to disturb you, but there is something I thought you should know." Helena turned her gaze toward her. Yes, Emily looked down for a moment, gathering her courage. "The crew chat is buzzing. The regional manager has been talking to corporate since you boarded. They're preparing a public statement. I thought you would want to be aware." Helena's breath caught slightly. "Thank you. Emily. I appreciate the update. The attendant nodded, her eyes softening further. You deserve better than what happened this morning. Helena offered a small, warm smile. Sometimes the world forgets its own heart. Emily's expression shifted, touched by the quiet wisdom in the words. She rose gently and stepped back toward the galley. Helena leaned into her seat again. Her thoughts felt quiet but potent, like the slow simmer of something significant preparing to unfold. She picked up her phone, unsure if she wanted more messages or a moment of peace. The screen stayed dark, no new notifications. She set it aside gently. Her body relaxed slightly, but her mind drifted again. She thought of her mother standing in the kitchen, teaching her how to braid her hair, the soft pull of the comb, the smell of warm biscuits cooling on the counter, and her mother whispering words she carried like a lullaby all her life. When the world is unkind, protect your spirit first. Everything else comes second. Helena closed her eyes briefly. She wished her mother could see her now. Not because she needed praise, but because she needed grounding. A reminder that her worth was not tied to the fear of others. She opened her eyes slowly as the man in 2C spoke for the first time since their earlier conversation. May I ask something personal? Helena turned her head, curiosity softening her gaze. If I can answer, I will. He hesitated, searching her expression respectfully. When you spoke on the phone earlier, you sounded steady, but it must take something from you, carrying that kind of calm. Helena considered the question. Her voice came out gentle. It does, but I learned a long time ago that anger rarely convinces those who refuse to listen. He nodded slowly. I understand. More than you know. She tilted her head slightly. Do you teach literature? He smiled faintly. Psychology, trauma, and resilience. Her breath caught for a moment. That explains the compassion. He shook his head lightly. Compassion is not a specialty of my field. It is a choice. Helena let the words settle. They stirred something deep within her, reminding her of the countless times she had chosen compassion even when she was exhausted from the weight of it. The plane dipped slightly as it passed through a pocket of unsettled air. The passengers murmured softly. Helena steadied herself, her hands anchored to her lap. The turbulence lasted only a few seconds before smoothing out, but the slight jolt seemed to open space in her mind. She reached for her phone again. This time, the screen lit instantly. A message from Marcus. Press already knows something happened. They are circulating questions. We need to prepare a statement. Do you want to speak publicly? Helena stared at the words. Her pulse tightened. Her breath slowed. She typed back with measured calm. Not yet. Let me think. She set the phone down again. Her gaze drifted toward the window as the sky below softened into a muted expanse, the clouds now thick like a white sea stretching endlessly. Her mind wandered again, this time into the echo of another memory. Her first corporate job. A colleague questioning her presence in the executive meeting, asking if she was lost, asking if she was the assistant. She'd laughed politely, brushed it aside, carried the sting inside her ribs for weeks. Another memory followed. A hotel valet handing her the keys to someone else's car because he assumed she was staff. Her quiet correction. The embarrassment flickering across his face. The ache in her chest that took hours to dissipate. And another memory. A stranger touching her hair without permission. The violation. Small yet profound. The loneliness of holding her dignity intact when others treated it carelessly. All those moments drifted through her mind like distant lanterns floating across water. They did not wound her now, but they shaped her. Always. Emily approached quietly again. "Dr. Brooks, we will begin beverage service soon. Would you prefer privacy?" Helena shook her head gently. "No. I am fine." Emily hesitated, then touched the back of the seat lightly before stepping away. A gesture of comfort without intruding. Helena felt gratitude rise within her. The man in 2C lowered his voice to something softer. "You are carrying a storm and a sunrise at the same time." Helena smiled faintly. "That is a poetic way to describe exhaustion." He chuckled softly. "Or strength." Her eyes glimmered with something tender. "Thank you." The hum of the engines deepened slightly as the plane began its slow descent toward Utah. The cabin dimmed further. Sunlight filtered through partly drawn shades, casting long streaks of gold across the aisle. People shifted in their seats again, preparing for landing. But Helena remained still. Her mind had reached a place beyond anger, beyond fatigue, beyond expectation. It reached a quiet clarity, a resolve she felt down to her bones. She knew now what she needed to do when the plane landed, what she needed to say, what she needed to demand. Not for herself alone, but for everyone who had lived through moments like hers without a voice. Her phone lit again. A new message, this time from the chair of her own board at Bright Halo. "We stand with you. Whatever happens next, you have our full support." Helena inhaled slowly, then exhaled with quiet strength. The descent continued. Clouds thinned. The world below became clearer, edges forming, landscapes taking shape. Helena folded her hands over her heart for a moment. A gesture no one noticed. A gesture meant only for herself. Truth had found its voice within her, and soon the world would hear it. The aircraft drifted steadily through the thinning layer of clouds until the landscape below revealed itself in full. Patches of desert earth stretched in warm shades of brown and red, intersected by winding roads that looked like faint brushstrokes across a vast canvas. The mountains stood still in the distance, quiet giants watching over the valley as the plane made its slow approach toward the runway. Helena let her eyes rest on the widening view. The world felt larger here, quieter, as if inviting her to breathe differently. She inhaled slowly, letting the sight steady her pulse. The morning had taken much from her, yet she felt a softness returning to her spirit now, the kind that comes only when truth has been spoken aloud. The captain's voice entered the cabin with a calm presence. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have begun our descent into Salt Lake City. Please return your seatbacks to their upright position." Seatbelts clicked. Passengers adjusted their belongings. Helena returned her folder to her tote bag and smoothed her blazer. Her movements were measured, as if she were preparing not just for landing, but for everything waiting beyond the aircraft door. Emily appeared again in the aisle. Her expression held a careful respect, the kind reserved for someone who had walked through something heavy but chosen grace over bitterness. "Doctor Brooks, if you need to exit the aircraft first, we have arranged for that. Corporate asked us to make the process easier for you." Helena's voice was warm. "Thank you, but I would like to leave with everyone else. I do not want to create more distance than already exists." Emily smiled softly, understanding the deeper meaning of her words. "Of course." The plane glided lower, its shadow passing over neighborhoods, stretching across fields and roads. The wheels touched down with a gentle thud, rolling with calm purpose across the runway. A collective sigh rippled through the cabin as the aircraft slowed. Helena braced her hands lightly on her knees. The descent had grounded more than her body. It had settled something inside her, a resolve, a steadiness, a knowledge that she would not shrink from what came next. When the aircraft reached the gate, the chime sounded and seatbelts clicked open like a soft chorus. People stood, stretching, gathering coats and bags, Helena remained seated for a moment, letting others move first. She did not want to push forward. She needed stillness, even if only for a breath. The man in 2C stepped into the aisle, then paused. He turned to her with a gentle, thoughtful expression. "Before you go, I want to tell you something." Helena looked up, waiting. "You did not just stand up for yourself this morning. You stood up for many people who never got the chance. That matters. More than you know." Helena felt a quiet warmth bloom in her chest. "Thank you. Truly." He nodded and stepped away, leaving behind a presence that lingered like the echo of kindness. When Helena finally rose, she gathered her tote bag and stepped into the aisle. Passengers glanced her way, offering soft smiles or respectful nods. No words were exchanged, yet something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, solidarity, understanding. As she moved toward the front, Emily waited by the door with her hands gently clasped in front of her. "Thank you for your grace today, Dr. Brooks." Helena nodded with sincerity. "Thank you for seeing me." The flight attendant's eyes shimmered for a moment, touched by the simplicity of the phrase. She stepped aside as Helena exited the plane. The jet bridge wrapped around her like a quiet tunnel. The air was cooler here, tinged with the scent of metal and recycled conditioning. Footsteps echoed softly behind her, but she walked at her own steady pace, letting each step ground her in present reality. At the end of the jet bridge, the regional operations manager waited. His posture was formal, but his expression carried genuine concern. He approached Helena cautiously. "Dr. Brooks, leadership is waiting for you in the conference room adjacent to the VIP lounge. They intend to begin the discussion immediately." Helena paused, studying his face. "And you?" He swallowed, unsure how to answer. "I want to ensure you are treated properly from this point forward." Her gaze softened, though she carried her strength with quiet dignity. "Thank you. Lead the way." He escorted her through the terminal. Travelers passed by in waves, dragging suitcases, laughing with companions, sipping coffees, greeting loved ones. Life moved around her in vibrant motion, unaware of the storm she carried inside. Yet somehow, the normalcy comforted her. It reminded her that the world held more than conflict. As they walked, her thoughts drifted toward the meeting ahead. The executives, the apologies, the questions, the urgency she could already sense gathering behind every waiting door. She knew what they feared. She also knew what they truly needed: integrity, accountability, transformation. The conference room door stood open. Inside, several members of the SkyWest leadership team waited. Their faces tightened with anxiety the moment they spotted her. A few stood. Some fidgeted with pens or tablets. The atmosphere felt heavy, thick with anticipation. Helena stepped inside with poised calm. Alan Coates, the board chair she had spoken to earlier, approached her first. "Dr. Brooks, thank you for coming so quickly. We are deeply sorry for the circumstances that led to this meeting." She nodded politely but did not sit. "I appreciate your apology, but this meeting is not about words. It is about responsibility." The room stilled. Helena's voice remained soft but carried a depth that commanded the air around her. What happened at the gate was not an isolated mistake. It was a symptom of something deeper: bias, lack of training, failing systems of accountability. The executives exchanged glances, some ashamed, others contemplative. "If you want to repair this," she continued, "then you must address the root, not the moment, the pattern." The board chair exhaled heavily. "You are right," another executive spoke. We have already suspended the employee for review. Helena shook her head gently. That is not enough. Firing one person does not fix a culture. It only hides the wound. The room fell silent again. She continued, I do not seek punishment. I seek transformation, and I will hold you to it. One executive leaned forward. What do you need from us? Dr. Brooks. She inhaled slowly, gathering her resolve. Bias training led by qualified experts. A mandatory review of frontline procedures. Clear systems for travelers to report discrimination without fear. Quarterly updates on your progress. And a commitment to lasting change, not temporary appeasement. The board chair nodded slowly. You will have all of that. In writing. Immediately. Helena studied him, searching for sincerity. She found it there, beneath his nervousness. Something in him had shifted after their call. Perhaps the weight of the moment had reached him. Perhaps conscience, long dormant, had awakened. She stepped back slightly. Then I will continue our negotiations, but only if these commitments are met. He bowed his head. They will be. For a moment, no one spoke. The room breathed. The weight lifted. Helena finally sat down, allowing herself a slow exhale. It was not victory she felt. It was something deeper, something quieter, a sense that the ground beneath her had steadied. She reached for her phone. One new message. It was from her father. He had written only 2 lines. Proud of you. Lena. Stand tall. Her eyes softened. A warmth spread through her chest. Steady and true. The ground remembered her, and she was ready for whatever came next. The meeting ended with a quiet certainty that lingered long after the executives left the room. Papers had been signed, commitments outlined, and responsibilities named with a clarity that felt almost unusual in a corporate environment. Yet the truth was still settling in Helena's chest, warm but heavy, like the afterglow of a long-needed conversation. She remained seated for a moment, her hands resting gently on the polished table. The room around her slowly regained its stillness, now free from tension. The blinds filtered in soft Utah light, dusting the walls in pale brightness. Outside, she could see travelers moving through the terminal, drifting in steady lines like small rivers of motion. The regional operations manager hovered at the door, unsure if he should stay. He shifted his weight before speaking. Dr. Brooks. Do you need anything before you continue your day? Helena offered a gentle smile. No, thank you. I just need a moment. He nodded respectfully and stepped out, closing the door behind him. Silence filled the room, warm and necessary. Helena inhaled deeply. The air smelled faintly of cedar polish and recycled airport ventilation. It grounded her, reminded her that she was still firmly in the present even though her spirit felt stretched between memory and responsibility. Her phone vibrated again, softer this time, like a small tap on her consciousness. A message from Marcus. Press briefing scheduled in 2 hours. They want a statement from you. I can deflect if needed. Helena closed her eyes, letting the question settle. She had expected this. She had known the moment she confronted Rachel that her morning would not remain private. Yet knowing and accepting were different things. Now she had to decide. She rose from her chair, stretching gently to release the tension gathered in her shoulders. Her steps felt slow and deliberate as she walked toward the window. The faint hum of the airport's activity seeped through the glass. A group of travelers passed below. A father held his daughter's backpack while she pointed excitedly at something beyond the frame. A pair of older men leaned together in easy conversation. A teenager rolled her suitcase while humming quietly to herself. Ordinary moments threaded through the world, steady and beautiful. Helena rested her fingertips against the window. The coolness of the glass answered her warmth. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "Speak only when words become necessary." Her father's voice echoed faintly in her memory. Truth must be spoken with care. Lena, not to wound, but to wake. When she turned from the window, she felt steadier. She slipped her phone into her bag and left the conference room. The hallway was quiet. Her footsteps carried down the polished floor like soft heartbeats. She moved toward the escalators, blending into the slow flow of passengers. No one recognized her here. She was simply another traveler moving through a long morning. She appreciated that anonymity more than she expected. A gentle aroma drifted from a nearby cafe, warm and comforting. Coffee, toasted cinnamon. Something sweet cooling on a tray. Her stomach tightened, reminding her she had eaten nothing since dawn. She stepped inside. The small cafe was tucked into a corner, crowded with the soft chatter of tired travelers and clinking cups. Helena waited patiently in line. It felt grounding to stand among strangers with no expectations pressed against her name. When she reached the counter, the barista smiled warmly. "What can I get started for you?" Helena returned the smile with gentle sincerity. "A small latte. Light foam. Coming right up." She stepped aside, folding her hands together as she watched the baristas work. The rhythm of their movements was soothing, pouring, steaming, wiping the counters with mindful precision, ordinary things that somehow held more comfort than the most elaborate apologies. When her drink was ready, she held it with both hands, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. She carried it to a small table near the window and sat down. For a moment, she simply breathed. The latte tasted smooth and delicate, not too strong, not too sweet. The warmth spread through her chest, easing the tightness that had lived there since the incident at the gate. Her mind returned to Rachel, the younger woman's trembling voice on the phone, the fear, the regret spilling out in uneven breaths. Helena didn't feel anger. She didn't feel vindicated. Instead, she felt the ache of recognition. People hurt each other not always because they wanted to, but because they didn't know how to see differently. And until they were taught, they repeated what they had absorbed from a world that didn't always challenge them. Helena held the cup gently as the truth settled deeper in her. She knew she had power today. Real power. Power to harm. Power to repair. Power to reshape the conversation before it reached the public. Her words could ignite headlines or soften hearts. She had choices to make, and each choice carried weight. She ran her thumb slowly over the rim of the cup. Her reflection curved slightly in the metal table's surface. Her eyes looked tired, but clear. A small voice brought her back. "Excuse me. Are you Dr. Brooks?" She turned. A young woman stood near her table, clutching her boarding pass in nervous hands. Her eyes were warm, hopeful, unsure. Helena offered a gentle nod. "Yes, I am." The woman exhaled with visible relief. "I was on your flight. I saw what happened at the gate, and I just wanted to say thank you." Helena blinked softly, touched by the sincerity. "You don't need to thank me." The woman shook her head. "I do. My son is biracial. He's only 6. I worry every day about the ways the world will see him before it hears him. When I watched you stand your ground, calm and steady, I saw the kind of strength I hope he grows into." Helena's breath trembled slightly. "What is his name?" "Evan. Tell Evan he deserves the world, and he doesn't need to earn his place in it." Tears gathered in the young woman's eyes. "Thank you. Truly." She stepped away quietly, leaving Helena in a silence filled with warmth and purpose. Helena placed a hand over her heart, pressing lightly. Something inside her shifted. Not pain, not fear, something gentler. A reminder of why truth mattered, why dignity mattered, why change mattered. Her phone vibrated again. Marcus, patient but persistent. Presses gathering. Your call. Helena inhaled deeply. Her gaze drifted upward, following the curve of the ceiling where soft light pooled. She felt her father's presence in the back of her mind, her mother's warmth, the memory of her younger self sitting on the steps of their home, questioning who she could become. And now she knew she would speak, not out of anger, not for attention, not for retaliation. She would speak because silence had carried this burden long enough. She rose from the table, took one last sip of her latte, and walked toward the meeting hall where the press waited. Her steps were steady, her pulse calm, her spirit grounded. Truth walked with her. And for the first time today, the weight began to lift. The hallway leading to the press room stretched long and quiet, lit by ceiling lamps that spilled gentle light across the polished floor. Helena walked with unhurried steps, her tote bag resting lightly on her shoulder, her spirit steady. Each footfall felt like a small anchor grounding her more deeply into the truth she carried. At the far end of the hallway, a cluster of staff members waited. Marcus stood among them, tall and composed, though his expression softened noticeably when he saw her approach. He moved toward her with measured steps. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly. Helena met his gaze. "Yes." My silence would say more than my words, and not in the way this moment needs. Marcus exhaled, relief mingling with concern. "Then I'm here, whatever you need." She nodded gratefully. His presence had always been a source of strength, not because he fought battles for her, but because he believed she could fight them herself. A representative from the airport approached, her hands clasped in front of her. "Dr. Brooks, the journalists are inside. They know you will speak briefly before the corporate team addresses the incident." Helena gave a small nod. "Thank you." Before stepping forward, she closed her eyes for a single breath. A slow inhale, a steady exhale. A quiet reminder that she was walking into this room not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a woman who understood the weight of her truth. When she entered, the murmur of voices softened instantly. Dozens of reporters stood behind a rope line. Cameras rested on shoulders, tripods angled slightly forward. Bright lights cast a warm glow against the backdrop. The moment she crossed the threshold, the room shifted into attentive stillness. People watched her not with hunger, but with respect. Helena stepped to the modest platform at the front. A podium waited there, clean and simple, its microphone adjusted to a comfortable height. Marcus positioned himself behind the row of chairs, far enough to give her space, yet close enough to signal support. She placed her hands lightly on the podium. The surface felt cool beneath her palms. For a moment, she didn't speak. She let the quiet settle. She let herself breathe into the moment until her voice could carry truth without trembling. "Thank you all for being here." Her voice was soft but resonant, carrying through the room with a warmth that drew people closer. "This morning, at the Denver airport, I experienced a situation that was painful and unnecessary. I was questioned, doubted, and dismissed in front of other travelers, not because of my paperwork, not because of my behavior, but because of an assumption." A quiet murmur moved through the press section. Pens lifted, cameras adjusted. Helena continued, her tone gentle, her pace unbroken. "I am not here to recount the details. Those will be addressed appropriately. I am here to name something larger, something many people face, often without the chance to speak about it." She paused. Her eyes softened as memories moved through her mind like quiet shadows. bias has a way of slipping into the spaces we forget to guard. It shows itself in questions that come too quickly, in suspicion that appears without reason, in the way someone looks at you and decides, before you say a word, what they think you are. The room listened with full stillness. This morning was not the first time I have lived through that, and I know it will not be the last, but what matters is how we choose to respond. Not with anger, not with humiliation, but with clarity. A few reporters lowered their pens, watching her with a depth of attention rarely given during press briefings. I want something better than punishment. I want growth. I want systems that recognize humanity before assumption. And I believe today's incident is an opportunity, not just for the airline, but for airports, companies, and communities to examine how easily harm can be done without intention. She felt her heartbeat settle into a slow, steady rhythm. She continued. The employee involved was frightened. She made a mistake, yes. But she is not the only one who must learn from this. The system around her must learn as well. A reporter lifted his hand slightly. Dr. Brooks, are you planning to pursue legal action? Helena met his gaze with calm. I am pursuing honest action. Actions that restore dignity, not destroy livelihoods. When we respond to mistakes with cruelty, we repeat the cycle we claim to oppose. Soft murmurs drifted across the room, touched by the weight of her words. Another reporter spoke. What message do you want people to take from today? Helena breathed gently. That dignity should never depend on perception. And that silence, when truth needs a voice, is a heavy burden to carry. I refuse to carry that silence today. A moment passed, then another. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of strangers who seemed to feel the gravity of her experience, and the hope woven through her words. One final question was asked by a woman in the second row. Dr. Brooks, how did this morning affect you personally? Helena felt something shift in her chest, a quiet opening. She answered with honesty. It reminded me of who I am, of what I've endured, of how far I've come, and of the importance of standing tall, not for myself alone, but for every person who has ever been made small for simply existing. The woman lowered her eyes, moved. Helena concluded softly, her voice tender. My story is not unique, and that is exactly why it must be told. The room fell silent for several breaths. Warm, heavy, reverent. She stepped back from the podium. The stillness broke only when the corporate team moved forward. Marcus approached her immediately, guiding her toward a quieter corner with gentle care. You did well, he said softly. Helena shook her head, her expression humble. I simply spoke the truth, and sometimes, Marcus replied, truth is the strongest thing a person can offer. She gave a faint, grateful smile. Reporters continued shouting questions after her, but she didn't turn back. The moment had passed. The message had been given. The weight inside her felt lighter as though the air itself had carried some of it away. She exited through a side door with Marcus at her side. The quiet of the hallway felt like a balm. She breathed more freely there. As they walked, Helena sensed something shift deep within her. The morning's pain had transformed into clarity. The confusion had given way to purpose. But she also felt fatigue at the edges of her strength, the kind that comes after emotional storms. Marcus noticed, You need rest? She smiled gently. I need air. He nodded with understanding. There's a garden courtyard nearby. Most people don't know it's there. They walked together toward it, past shops, past bustling travelers, past the echoes of the morning's ordeal. Helena stepped outside into the small courtyard. The air held a crispness that brushed her skin gently. Wind rustled the leaves of a few small trees planted along the stone path. A fountain whispered in the corner, its gentle water falling in soft cadence. She sat on a bench and exhaled slowly. For the first time since dawn, she felt the world breathe with her. The weight had not vanished, but it no longer controlled her. She whispered to herself, a quiet affirmation. It is enough. What I gave today is enough. The fountain continued its gentle rhythm. The leaves stirred overhead, and Helena allowed herself to rest, not because the journey was over, but because she had finally given herself permission to pause. The quiet of the courtyard held Helena like an embrace she hadn't realized she needed. The gentle swirl of air, the muted splash of the fountain, the rustle of leaves overhead. All of it felt like the world reminding her that even after exhaustion, there was space to breathe again. For a long moment, she simply let herself sit. Shoulders relaxed, eyes gently closed. Her hands rested loosely in her lap as though the morning's tension were slowly draining out of her fingers. Marcus remained nearby, but respectfully silent. His presence was calm, unobtrusive, giving her the room to gather herself without feeling observed. When she finally opened her eyes, she found him watching the fountain. "Will you tell them you need the rest of the day off?" he asked softly. Helena considered the question carefully. "I should. But part of me wonders if moving forward might help me settle again. Keeping still too long after something heavy can make the weight return." Marcus nodded with faint understanding. "There's truth in that. But you also deserve gentleness right now." A small smile touched her lips. Maybe both can exist. A breeze carried the faint scent of pine from the surrounding planters. She took it in slowly, grounding herself in the subtle fragrance. Her heart still felt tender, but steadier. Not mended, not hardened, simply settled. She rose from the bench with a careful breath. Marcus stepped forward, ready if she needed support, but she shook her head with a grateful smile. "I'm all right." They began walking back toward the terminal's interior, moving through the soft light filtering from the courtyard skylight. Each step felt like another piece of her returning to herself. When they entered the corridor, Helena saw someone waiting near the wall. A young employee in a Navy airport uniform, nervously twisting the hem of her shirt. She seemed hardly more than 20. Her expression unsure until she caught sight of Helena. "Dr. Brooks." Helena paused, giving her full attention. "Yes." The young woman hesitated before stepping closer. "I was here earlier, outside the conference room. I heard some of what you said, not all of it, but enough. I just wanted to say, thank you. My older brother went through something similar when he was trying to get a job here. He didn't say anything. He didn't think anyone would listen. Hearing you today, it meant something." Helena's eyes softened. "What is your brother's name, Michael? Tell Michael his voice matters, and tell him that silence is not the measure of his worth." The young woman blinked back unexpected tears. "I will. Thank you." She stepped away, leaving Helena with a warm ache in her chest. Marcus touched her elbow gently. "You're changing more than you realize." Helena shook her head. "I'm only speaking what so many have lived." They continued walking until they reached a quieter wing of the terminal where large windows overlooked the mountains. Clouds gathered gently at the peaks, forming soft ribbons of mist that drifted over the rugged slopes. Helena stopped in front of the glass, drawn to the view. There was something in the mountains she had always admired. Their stillness, their strength, their refusal to bow under the weight of time. She pressed her palm lightly to the window, feeling the faint coolness. Her reflection appeared there, softened by the light. She didn't look tired anymore. She looked grounded, present, awake. Marcus spoke quietly. "You know, when you were at the podium." The room shifted, not because of the attention, but because of the honesty. They didn't expect grace from you. They didn't expect depth. They expected anger. And instead, you showed them something different. Helena let the words wash over her. She wasn't sure she deserved praise for simply choosing what felt right, but she appreciated the sincerity. Anger has its place, she said softly, but change grows best where truth is spoken with steadiness. Marcus smiled faintly. You're going to be quoted everywhere by sunset. She laughed softly, the sound warm but careful. I hope they quote the message, not the moment. The two stood quietly for several breaths, watching the gentle movement of clouds around the mountain peaks. The calm wrapped around them like a soft blanket. After a few minutes, Helena turned away from the view. There's something I need to do before we leave the airport. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Tell me what you need. I want to check in on Rachel. He blinked, surprised. You want to see her? Yes. Not to revisit the morning, but to offer clarity. She deserves understanding, even if she made a mistake. Marcus didn't argue. He simply nodded. I'll find out where she is. It didn't take long. They followed a staff corridor that led to the employee level beneath one of the concourses. The hallway here was less polished, more practical, lined with storage rooms and break areas. A small office door was open. Inside, Rachel sat alone at a narrow desk, her hands clasped tightly, eyes red from crying. The supervisor stood nearby, his posture rigid with responsibility. When Helena stepped into the doorway, both heads lifted instantly. Rachel froze. Dr. Brooks, the supervisor said, startled. Helena nodded gently. May I speak with her? The supervisor hesitated. Yes, of course. I'll step out. He left quickly, closing the door behind him. Rachel stood up slowly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm so sorry. I never meant. I didn't think. I was scared when I realized what I had done. Helena lifted a hand gently. Please sit. Rachel sank back into the chair, trembling slightly. Helena pulled a nearby chair and sat across from her. Rachel. I didn't come here for an apology. I came to offer clarity. The younger woman looked confused through her tears. Clarity. Helena folded her hands gently. You were part of something that hurt me. Yes. But you were also part of something you didn't fully understand. Fear can make people react before they think. Bias can move through someone quietly, without permission. But once it shows itself, we have a responsibility to face it. Rachel's breath shook. I feel ashamed. Shame is only useful if it leads to growth, Helena replied softly. What matters is what you choose after this moment, not what you did before it. Tears ran down Rachel's cheeks. I want to do better. Truly. Helena leaned in slightly, her tone warm but steady. Then begin by listening. Not just to the rules of your job, but to the lives of the people you serve. People carry stories you cannot see from a distance. Rachel wiped her eyes, nodding quickly. I will. I promise. Helena placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I believe you, and I forgive you. Rachel broke into soft sobs, surprised and undone by the word forgive. She covered her face with her hands. Helena waited, giving her space. People weren't always prepared for forgiveness. It was heavier than blame, softer than punishment, and it required more honesty than most moments in life. When Rachel finally looked up again, her expression held something new, hope, fragile but present. Helena rose slowly. Take care of yourself, and learn from this. That is all I ask. Rachel nodded with sincerity that trembled at the edges. Thank you. I won't forget. As Helena stepped out of the room, Marcus joined her in the hallway. His eyes searched hers quietly. "You did more for her than anyone else could have today." Helena shook her head softly. "I did what my soul needed." Not what headlines needed. They walked back toward the terminal's main concourse where sunlight now streamed through the windows in warm, patient beams. Helena looked ahead with a steady, quiet strength. The world had shifted a little today, but more importantly, she had too. Not toward hardness, not toward bitterness, but toward something deeper. A place where dignity and compassion could stand side by side, where truth could breathe, where healing could begin, where the light could find her again. Helena Brooks' story is not only about the pain of discrimination, but also a profound lesson about how a person can choose to stand up without losing their kindness. Life sometimes puts us in moments where we are misunderstood, misjudged, or overlooked simply because we are different. But it is how we respond to those moments that defines our true worth. Helena chose calm over anger, dialogue over confrontation, and healing over revenge. This is a great lesson for all of us, especially those who have experienced many ups and downs, that dignity is always in our hands, and kindness is always the power to touch the hearts of others. Sometimes, just a gentle word, a calm moment, or a broader perspective is enough to change an environment, a system, even a person. And when we choose to stand up for kindness, even just once, we are silently paving the way for those who come after us. Finally, thank you for staying until this moment. If the story touches your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. That is how you help spread more warm and humane things to more people.